Daniel's been he's been pretty busy over there. He's like pouring over on Martell up there in Denver. So
not so.
I mean, do you prefer goats? I mean,
not my role model in that area.
I mean, we should start a new podcast called Tips with Oberyn. You know,
just the tip with Oberyn Martell.
I could see where you were going there.
Catch it this fall, right after Can't Tie Win 'Em All.
Welcome back to the Cast Beyond the Wall. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and I am joined today by three lovely faces. Two of them you know, one of them you've heard of. From the man who is so dedicated that he is podcasting via honeymoon in Denver. Sir, introduce yourself.
Daniel Stoll.
The gentleman here with the headset.
Austin Lucari.
All right, and we are here to discuss this week's episode, The Laws of Gods and Men, thanks to our partner at WeGotThisCovered.com. Before we get rolling, we're going to go ahead and introduce you to this week's special guest. He's actually been mentioned a few times on our podcast so far as a frequent tweeter and commenter and harasser. Sir, introduce yourself.
I am Lord Commander Dalton Stuart of the House Good Trash.
We are so excited to have Dalton on. He's an old podcasting buddy of mine from the Good Trash Genre Cast. You guys should all go check it out. And he'll talk about it a little bit more later in the show. Dalton, so glad to have you on, sir.
I'm happy to be here, guys.
All right. Before we get knee-deep in this week's episode, let's go ahead and do a quick little interview with Mr. Dalton Stuart so we can kind of get an idea, who is this guy? I mean, we know House Good Trash. We know he is a Lord Commander, but other than that, what does the mind of Dalton Stuart look like?
It's a terrifying place.
It's a dark, dark, lonely place filled with pop culture references and snarky humor. Dalton, to start off, who would you say is your favorite Game of Thrones character?
Well, Tyrion's off the table, obviously, because that's what everyone would say. I got kind of a cheat. I want to say Jon Snow, but what makes Jon Snow so great, what made him an even better character than I think he already was his relationship with Ygritte. So I think the two of them really as a pair, I loved that dynamic between them, and I wish we got to see more of Ygritte this season so far. I've kind of been disappointed by that. But I like the relationship the two of them had and the character growth that came out of that. And also, you gotta love Tyrion's posse. I mean, Bronn and Podrick are just the best, and they're so much fun. Every scene that has one of them in it is just a fun scene.
We've got the Tyrion posse, you've got Jon Snow, and I'm a big fan of Jon Snow myself. He's actually really up there for me. But, okay, so who's your favorite? Who is your least favorite?
You know, it's a tough call because there's so many bastards in Game of Thrones. And I'm not talking about people with the last name Snow or Stone. I hate the Boltons so much because they're all so evil. I mean, between Roose and Ramsey, it's just the House Bolton their banner is a flayed person. They're the flayed man. I mean, how can you be on Team Bolton? Seriously. And sorry, Caleb, I'd say next to the Boltons, it's got to be Littlefinger. I mean, you love to hate him. Don't get me wrong. He's a well-written character, and I love Aidan Gillian, especially from his days on The Wire.
Yes.
But every time I see him, I can't help but think about him in Dark Knight Rises going.
The flight plan I just filed with the agency lists me, my man, Dr. Pavel here, but only one of you. First one to talk gets to stay on my aircraft.
A lot of loyalty for a hired gun.
Or perhaps he's wondering why someone would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane.
Between that really weird scene in Dark Knight Rises and all of his weird, evil Littlefinger machinations, I gotta say it's Peter Baelish. He's just awful.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. He pretty much is one of the most evil human beings out there, you know, objectifying women to the extreme, like to the point that they're not even like just sex objects. They're actually commodifications, which is pretty...
Yeah, they're literally commodities, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, he commodifies them, not commodifications. Pulled a George W. there. Let's just take a moment, guys, to trash House Bolton, because we haven't done this yet enough. Roose Bolton is a backstabber. Ramsey Bolton is probably the most sadistic, creepy dude in Game of Thrones. He makes Joffrey look like he's from Frozen or something.
Sometimes I like to close my eyes and imagine what it'd be like when summer does come. Bees will buzz, kids will blow dandelion fuzz.
Yeah, Joffrey has the benefit of just being a psychopath who's just kind of a dum-dum. Ramsey is like an intelligent sociopath, and that to me is so much more terrifying.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's the thing. Like he knows exactly what he's doing is pretty freaking crazy, and he enjoys every moment of it. Joffrey almost has the cop out or the excuse to say that he doesn't really realize what he's doing is bad. So
yeah, he's just go ahead, Austin. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say it's a weird family to be in the Game of Thrones universe because they're so stereotypically evil. You don't usually see that.
It is unlike any other characters in the universe. I mean, the Lannisters have these shades of gray. Meanwhile, the Boltons are just like mustache twirlingly evil.
Yeah.
Very much so. But although, and then let's look at their henchmen. Locke, also a crazy sociopath. When Roose Bolton is the most reasonable, normal person in your clan, I'd say there's something like that.
Yeah, you got a problem when that's your starting ground.
I at least have some sort of respect for him on some sort of level, but yeah, if that's your starting point, things aren't looking very good.
Dalton, if you were going to pick a house to join, which one would you go with?
Again, I've got a cop-out, half-cheat answer. I'm going to opt out of the Game of Thrones, as it were. I don't want any part of these politics because I don't think I'd last very long. I'm going to just join the Night's Watch, as I alluded to in my intro. Because basically they're Jedis. I mean, minus the powers. They're a lot of them are convicted criminals who chose that over execution. But you know what? They stand for something. At the end of the day, they're all that stands between Westeros and what lies beyond. So I mean, you can't go wrong there.
Yeah. It is kind of nice. There is a hint of nobility there. Although I would probably be a lot more apt to want to join the Night's Watch if it was way back like it used to be, when it was actually people willing to join, not a bunch of like rapists and prisoners and people who can't afford to eat who go there.
Rapist, thief, murderer, just going down the line.
Yeah, cannibals. The Legend of the Alley.
He was a legend!
The Legend of the Alley! So yeah, that's kind of cool though. I mean, there is a hint of nobility there that none of the other houses have to offer. They're all kind of selfish jerks, except for maybe the Starks. Maybe.
Well, if you join House Stark, though, you've got a really short life expectancy because you still got to play the game.
It's true, and the Starks don't know how to win a game to save their life. So, how long have you been watching Game of Thrones for exactly?
I started with a spoiler. I was reading an episode of Entertainment Weekly that talked about the shock of them killing off Ned Stark. And I was like, well, holy crap. Obviously it's, he's going to die because that's just what he does.
Sean Bean always dies every time.
Sean Bean has no choice but to die, so it should have been that shocking. But I was really, the whole show had been kind of promoted by being the Sean Bean vehicle. And when I heard about that, I was like, I was already interested, and I was like, now I got to check this out. So I binge-watched season 1, and I've been watching as it aired every season since then. I'm not a book reader at all. I've decided to go ahead and let the show finish before I crack the books open. But yeah, I've been watching since pretty nearly the beginning.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's so few beginning. Myself, I'm not even among the crowd who started watching the show from the very beginning. I didn't start after season 2, so there's so few who make it all the way back to the reaches of season 1. Just become so huge. So you've been watching since season 1, and what would you say is probably the most memorable moment of Game of Thrones you've experienced? Now, that could be a moment from inside, in terms of story and shock value. It could be like when you're watching with friends and something crazy, and like your friends react all crazy. I mean, like, what would you pick as like one of your greatest moments?
Well, I'm a solo watcher, so I don't really get that experience until after, when I'm talking about with other people. And there are the big shocking moments, the Red Wedding and the Purple Wedding and Blackwater Bay, which is just, from top to bottom, a really fantastic episode. But I think what sets Game of Thrones apart is the small moments, and that's why I love the meetings of the Small Council, particularly back when Tyrion, was Hand of the King. Those moments from season 2 are so great. I mean, they're these kind of microcosms that really sum up what the show is all about in these great scenes with all these character actors just really getting into the part and into the script. So I got to say those small council meetings from back in season 2. I mean, they're just so great, and there's so many of them.
Yeah,
we get to revisit those a little bit this week.
I was so it made me really happy.
It was it's like let's check Oberyn into the mix and see what happens. And I have to go with you too. I think one of the most underrated things in season 2, kind of while also being a great season, I feel like falls by the wayside because it doesn't have Ned Stark's death and it doesn't have the Red Wedding. Even though Blackwater is by far probably the most at least daunting and breathtaking episode of the show. I feel like season 2 gets overlooked a lot when people are talking about the greatness of it, and I honestly think the season where Tyrion is the Hand is probably one of the strongest of the show. That his scenes as Hand of the King were some of the greatest of the whole show, I think.
Absolutely.
As we do every week, we're going to go ahead and have kind of a question of the week where the four of us kind of just sit around and talk, so for fun and whatnot. So this week's question is, who is the smartest man, woman, or thing in Westeros? We'll start, Mr. Austin Lucari.
I gotta go with Bronn. He's a sellsword, and he's one of the few people smart enough to know that whoever has the money has the power, and if you're following that person, you're probably going to be on the winning side, and that's what he does throughout the show. He just he seems to follow, and we'll get into that some more this later on, but he seems to follow the person with the money, and I think it pays off for him.
You've given me a taste for the finer things. And if you want me to carry on protecting you, you'll need to pay more.
I thought we were friends.
We are. But I'm a sellsword. I sell my sword. I don't loan it out to friends as a favour.
How much?
Double.
Double?
I'm a knight now. Knights are worth double.
Don't even know how much I'm paying you now.
Which means you can afford it.
I'm going to go with Tywin, I think. I just think he obviously has put his family in a position where they are just in complete control, and even when they have things go wrong in the family, he is able to corral it into a way where it can benefit him. You know, as Tyrion said, even Tywin can take a family tragedy and turn it into a positive. You know, Tywin just has this ability to, no matter what happens, he has control. He knows what's going on. He thinks very far ahead. And I think he's one of the greatest minds in Westeros.
So, Dalton Stuart, who's the smartest man in Westeros?
You know, I gotta go with Lord Varys. I mean, he has the cunning of Littlefinger, but, you know, he does have that nobility and wanting what's right for the kingdom that the Starks had, but he knows how to play the game. He knows that if you keep your head down and you don't be a dick, you'll live a lot longer. So Varys is always one step ahead of everybody else, but he also doesn't, show his hand. He keeps his cards pretty close to his chest. But we don't see him very often because he is, the master of whispers. I mean, he knows what's going down, but he doesn't feel the need to share it unless somebody who is his boss, in this case Tywin, asks him what's going on. And then in that case, he'll go ahead and let everybody know as much as they need to know to get off his back.
So that leaves me and listeners of the podcast. I mean, have we been listening to the last 5 weeks? Have we been listening to the last 5 weeks of the podcast? I gotta say, Littlefinger. Why? Go back and listen to the last 5 weeks. I'll hit the high points. Man came from nothing. Came from a lower underhouse. He's climbed the ladder of chaos, per se. He has started a war that has allowed him to gain even more power, and is now one of the most dangerous men in all of Westeros, who also has the most potential to really take the throne if he keeps playing the way of things he has been, because he has gained all this power and nobody really brings it into question. So I gotta go with Littlefinger because he's playing the game. I think he's playing the game. Varys is really the only other one I could compare him to, because both of these guys have done it, have come a very long way, and both of them have obscene amounts of power for where they come from, and both of them we're still yet to see exactly where their end game is heading. All right, guys. Well, that was a lot of fun. As always, we like to have these questions, and if one of you listeners out there has a question that you're like, hey, I want these guys to discuss in question of the week, feel free to tweet at us at cast_beyond_the GOT, or follow us on Facebook and send us a message that way. We'd love to hear about it. But now, I think it is time for us to dive headfirst into the laws of gods and men.
I'm here for Theon Greyjoy.
This is turning into a lovely evening.
And you feel your blood gives you a claim on our gold more than any man living. She has conquered the city and rules as its queen.
Everybody is interested in something.
I've always hated Tyrion.
He killed his king.
This isn't a trial, it's a farce.
Do you wish to confess?
It was I was kind of thinking about the structure of this episode, and it's very much like a string of events. Unlike a lot of episodes where it cuts back and forth, this one, which starts off with Braavos, then goes to the Greyjoys, then goes to Marine, then goes back to King's Landing. So I thought it was actually kind of cool. I kind of like it like that, where we get chunks, but they're all like, instead of like taking breaks in between to hop around these storylines, we saw it all consecutively. But overall, I think this was a great episode. I think we saw Peter Dinklage deliver his Emmy reel submission for the year. I think we got to see the Greyjoys finally come back, which is really exciting. And we got to see that Dany really doesn't... She's not fully in touch with what it takes to be a ruler. Now she's starting to realize that Ez is going to be a lot harder and more obnoxious than I expected.
I have to say, not only do I think this is the best episode of the season, I think it might be the best episode of the series for me.
Wow.
I really do. I feel like it hit everything that Austin loves, and then had the kicker of the trial, which was just fantastic. That's got to be my favorite speech of the series completely. I think that's better for me than the Chaos as a Ladder speech. Like, all of it just so great. And then I got the Greyjoys, so how can I be sad about that?
Austin's a Greyjoy fanboy. He's like, oh, the Greyjoys are back. Best episode of the season so far.
Well, and he didn't have to see Sam, so...
Oh, yeah. Oh, good point.
Screw
There was
that guy.
no Sam. So here's what I'm learning from Austin's synopsis here. He hates the Starks, he hates Sams, he loves Greyjoys, because two of those things weren't in this episode, and one of them was.
Mm-hmm. And then I like Daenerys. She was there. I work for a bank, and we had Braavos, so it's perfect for Austin.
The banking clan will sign your treaty.
I thought this week's episode was really solid. I'm not necessarily as big of a fan of it as I think Austin is. I didn't think it was as strong as last week's episode for me. But I did really enjoy this. We had to see a lot of characters that we hadn't got to see this season, or we haven't got to see a lot of this season, such as Yara. And we got to go back to Theon, which actually was probably one of my favorite scenes of this episode, just outside of the trial at the end. But I thought it was a really strong episode. But for me, it was a little bit of a step down from last week's episode.
Gotcha. That's a fair game. And honestly, Mr. Stoll, I quite frankly, I think I have to agree with you. This week's was very good, though. This trial is probably trial.
I do think that the trial almost overshadowed the entire episode for me.
Yeah.
When I think about the episode, I think a lot about the trial. I'm like, oh yeah, and this other stuff happened kind of too. It was cool.
When we think back to the laws of gods and men, we're gonna remember the trial. We're not. I mean, the other scenes, and I did like some of these other scenes a lot. I really did, especially the Theon stuff.
Too.
But I think when we think about this episode, we're gonna think about the trial, and remember the trial was awesome. We're not gonna think the episode was awesome. We'll remember, man, the trial was great.
I think you guys have touched on, Daniel and Caleb, I think you both touched on this a little bit. This episode has what's kind of been a fairly common occurrence lately, is where we have this string of vignettes that lead us to this big set piece at King's Landing. I mean, we got this with the purple wedding, rather, and it's something the show does very well sometimes when there's a big, and it did it with the red wedding, in fact, actually, when there's a big thing that's going to take place in the episode, all of that screen time is devoted to the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the show.
Yeah.
And I think this episode did that really well in a way that it still paid service to these other locations that we saw, and they were really linked thematically quite well. It doesn't fall into the trap that I think some Game of Thrones episodes do, where it's all world building and nothing really happens. I think we get a lot of good world building here and a lot of good setting the stage for what's to come, especially in the trial. We get, Tyrion's final moments, we really get a picture of what's to come. So I like that, because we do have these big events, but we also have this world building and this character building and this setting up the plot. And it does what Game of Thrones does so well, is ask us these questions that still relate to the modern world, these questions of the nature of justice and power and the malleability of truth, especially in that trial. We really get a look at, there's the truth and there's how you present the truth, making it its own truth in a way I find really fascinating. So that was something I really appreciated from this episode. It's going to be an episode of Game of Thrones that viewers are going to remember as one of those episodes that really gets at what makes Game of Thrones special, that touches on those themes that we really appreciate about the show. All the power and all of these dynamics that make Game of Thrones so watchable and so engaging. And I think this is an episode that really puts those at the forefront.
We finally got to Braavos. We've been hearing about Braavos for 4 seasons, 3.5 seasons, and we finally made it. We got to see the epic Titan of Braavos statue, and we got to get there. And you know what? I wasn't expecting us to get there the way we did, because Stannis never goes there in the books, and I was like, hey, it's Braavos, under totally different context than I've ever seen before. But this was a really cool scene. We got to see why Davos is really good at his job. And I know we've seen that a few times, but I think here so more than any other time in the show.
I just want to say that I thought it was really cool that George R.R. Martin did a really cool J.K. Rowling reference with including Gringotts here.
Mr. Harry Potter wishes to make a withdrawal.
And does Mr. Harry Potter have his key?
So, yeah, when the goblins started taking money for the Trade Federation, droids were...
Well, at least in Game of Thrones, we're fortunate enough that the bankers aren't all awful Jewish stereotypes, so at least we have that.
This is... I thought we really got to see Davos show off why he actually is good at his job. I know we've seen him rally troops to Stannis, which is great. We've seen him be honest with Stannis, which is great. But this is Davos we haven't seen. He's very persuasive with people he doesn't know. He's very persuasive with these guys he's never met before, and he says, listen, you're trusting all this power with essentially Tommen Baratheon, who is a kid who doesn't know what the heck he's doing, and you're not going to trust Cersei or Jaime, yada yada. But here's a man you can trust. Here's how I know. I have no freaking fingers, and because he cut them off, and guess what? I work for him. This guy is definitely the guy who's gonna have you paid back.
I think it highlights, who really has the power at Dragonstone. I'm really not a Stannis fan. I like him in that his scenes are interesting, but I think we see here that the guy that's really pulling the strings when it's not Melisandre is Davos, because he knows what's going on and he knows how to get things done. He's a very pragmatic guy, and he knows how to sell Stannis. He knows how to put Stannis up on a pedestal, and like you said, Kale, I don't have any fingers and I still follow the guy. So, but without Davos, they don't get that loan from Braavos. They just don't.
They talk about Tywin a little bit, and we like to think of Tywin as like this huge mastermind, that he's the biggest, most powerful person in the entire Game of Thrones universe, and that's just not true. He's a joke to these people because they actually have the money, and they're propping up Tywin in a sense. And between last week, where we discover that the Lannisters are going broke, and this week where we find out clearly the bank doesn't really have all that much respect for him if they're willing to just bail on him because of something a former smuggler said, Tywin doesn't have as much power as we thought he did.
Well, it definitely does pull back the lens a little further, because, Game of Thrones does this in some sense. Early on we thought Cersei was the one with power, right? And we pull back a little further. Nope, Tywin's the one with power within Westeros. But now we're pulling back even further. Outside of Westeros, there's this other great, awesome power called the Iron Bank that actually is the one who gives Tywin his power. So it does kind of pull back and say, hey, there are larger works here, even than those figures in Westeros. And I think this is really great. The show has done a really good job, this season in particular, at bringing Essos back into the picture a little more. Westeros is where most of our plot takes place, but we really are seeing the rest of the world come into play, and the fact that, hey, this stuff may be off, it may be offshore a little bit, but it still matters to the plot.
Like Dalton, I am also not a Stannis fan. In fact, you could almost call me a Stannis hater.
Anti-Stannis.
But I am a Davos fan. So it was really cool to see Davos sort of showing his usefulness to Stannis. And I think Stannis was kind of taken back by that. Stannis has tried to maybe kill Davos 2-3 times, or said that he's going to behead whatever 2 or 3 times by this point. And Davos is showing us here that he is extremely useful to Stannis. And if Stannis doesn't have Davos, then maybe he wouldn't be where he was at all. He sort of puts all of his money in Melisandre. So I really enjoyed that from that perspective as a Davos fan.
I don't hate him by any means. I just think he's white bread. He's plain, kind of boring.
I think,
it is his supporting cast that really makes that storyline interesting.
For sure. I mean, Davos and Melisandre really highlight his storylines to a different level.
I think the Davos and Melisandre sort of clash while Stannis is sort of just standing there is what makes that storyline so interesting.
They're like shoulder angels, is what they are.
Exactly. My only frustration actually with Davos is that he's still loyal to him. I kind of wish that I feel like Davos should have left him a long time ago, but I do respect him for the fact that he continues to be loyal to the person that he said he was going to be loyal to his whole life.
He's the clingy ex-girlfriend who can't just let go. He just want to keep believing. He just want to keep believing that Stannis will come around. He'll come back around and stop beating him up.
Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling.
Of the people that have a blood claim to the throne of some sort, I do think he would be the best king. Because I think once he got what he wanted, he'd throw off the religious stuff because he doesn't really care about it. It's just a tool for him. And I think he's smart enough, strong enough, and pretty much even-headed enough to actually run things well. Do I like him? No, but I think he would run things pretty well.
You think he'd be a good king?
I do.
But okay, and I will say before we move on to the next storyline, we did get to see Mr. Davos gets to meet up back with his best friend, Salador, the pirate guy, whatever his name is. Love this guy.
The sex
pirate, exactly. The man who's had that Stannis has stood with on all 4 of his wedding days.
We get some OG Game of Thrones sex position.
Yeah. I thought this was really good because we got to see kind of the duality of Davos, that he can speak on a very, very high level with the most powerful people probably in the entire world. And then we immediately see him down pretty much in the gutters with all these kind of scummy people. You have pirates and prostitutes and in this bath and stuff. And so he's really like a man of the people, I think. And at the same time can still stand up with any of the nobles and any of the really high, powerful people. So it makes him a really, really interesting character. And we got to see that here a little bit highlighted.
Let's go ahead. Austin, lead the charge. This is your storyline, brother. You've got this awesome. The Greyjoys are back. You've been jizzing in your pants.
Jizz in my pants.
Just waiting for even the thought of this moment.
It was so great. Here's the thing about this scene. The greatest part about this scene is the speech heading into it, where she's reading the letter from Ramsey Bolton. So we get the old gratuitous sex thing.
Jizz in my pants.
Classic Game of Thrones. And so they just start charging into the Dreadfort, think they're going to take Theon and drag him out. We get to see that Theon is truly broken. He has his chance for escape, and he just won't take it.
Well, he thinks it's funny. He thinks it's a trick. That is how mentally just broken this dude is. He thinks it's a trick. He's like, don't take me away. I'll get punished. I'll give this a trick.
And the weirdest thing about this scene is you get the whole kind of the whole TV trope thing where they're like, charge! Charge! Because they charge in, and then Ramsey is sitting there fumbling with keys, and she could have just stabbed him in the throat right then while he's trying to let the dogs out.
Yeah, I thought about that. Hey, although
runs away.
Can we please note how badass that Ramsey looked with his
oh my god,
that's all over his chest. He's got the 2 dual knives. And he's like, this is going to be quite the.
This is what I can't figure out. Are those cuts from him fighting, or are those cuts from him having sex?
Oh, those are sex cuts.
Those are definitely sex cuts.
Okay. He was having some knife play going on.
Jizz in my pants.
Overall, I'm really, really happy to see the Greyjoys come back into play. I think it was a little disappointing. It was just kind of a little hint, oh yeah, Greyjoys are still here, but nothing really got accomplished. The big part of this is where Ramsey starts to realize that he has truly broken Theon, and Theon will do anything he needs him to do, and decides to make him pretend to be someone he's not, and that's Theon Greyjoy. So we're going to see some intrigue. It'll be interesting to see how Reek can play a role, being as broken as he is, and how much Yara and Balin Greyjoy will believe him.
I thought the bathtub scene was horribly unnerving. One. Every time bathtubs in the show. Last time we got Jaime and Brienne. That was also very. It was a great scene, but it was also like, ooh, this is sad. This time we're like, ooh, this is disturbing.
Much like weddings, George R. R. Martin does not like baths.
Do you guys think Theon Greyjoy is really gone?
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, can he be rehabilitated? Maybe, but he is totally broken right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm not. He's gone right now. I mean, I'm not saying someone can't bring him back or be rehabilitated, as Austin said. But yeah, he's just really broken. That was his sister, like they bobbed in there, and immediately he like turns and cowers in fear. Yara was freaking awesome in this scene, by the way, which was really cool to see, like how awesome she really was. But yeah, I think Theon is, he's just gone, and I have no idea what Ramsey's really planning with him. I was really interested to see where that storyline is headed. I don't know. I mean, I guess he says he needs him to be Theon, so I'm guessing he's going to use him try to use leverage with Balin or something like that.
Wants him to take a castle, he said. So
right. So yeah, I'm not exactly 100% sure where it's headed, and I'm really excited to see where the storyline heads.
Well, it definitely finally gave some purpose to the endless scenes of torture from last season. Yeah. In that we do get to see the end result of that, which is that I think Theon's broken. I mean, he's just gone. He is a completely broken man at this point. I'd agree with you guys. I don't think it's impossible for him to come back, but I mean, as far as the position he's in, he has totally succumbed to a Randy Snow.
I think it will take, if he were to come back, it would take I don't feel like it's a long process, and it's not a quick fix. That's something that it will take a very long time, and someone, I don't know who even could do it, but someone will have to take a very long time before they can bring him back to being any sort of normal.
Listen, man, one trip to Professor X and he's good to go. Last season, we talked a lot about Theon's torture scenes, and most of our guests really, really hated Theon. Me and Daniel stuck up for him quite a bit, and I think people. The other question that was raised about him was whether all this torture was payoff. And honestly, I think, and you guys can tell me if you agree or not, I think he has suffered a fate far, far worse than death could ever serve Theon. So my two questions are, do you guys agree? And two, do you think that Theon has suffered enough pain to offer some sort of retribution for his acts of season 2?
I think he definitely has suffered more than needed. Like I kind of said just a second ago, I was sort of a defender of Theon. I've never thought he was evil at all. I thought that he made some very, very dumb and bad decisions, but I never thought that those were from evil motivations. I think he suffered way too much to get some sort of, what he deserved has been passed, if that makes sense. And then what was your first question again?
The debt has been paid, in other words.
Yeah, the debt has definitely been paid, more than once, actually.
I think he is a bad person, frankly. He might have had motivations to impress his father, but that doesn't excuse the things that he did. Now, did he deserve this? No, I don't think anyone deserves what happened to him. I think he deserved death, and that would have been better than what he got.
Definitely a fate far worse than death. Did this all, have a purpose? Did we see too much? I think that's a tough question. I think in hindsight, now that we're seeing, where Theon Greyjoy's ended up as Reek, I'd say it serves a purpose, like I touched on earlier, but I think it is possible we might have seen too much. But in hindsight, it is serving a greater purpose to the story. As far as if the debt's paid, I mean, yeah, he did some pretty awful things, and this really gets at the question of, I will answer justice with injustice, this question of the nature of justice that we get a lot in this episode. And I think he did suffer a fate far worse than his crimes. He did some terrible, awful things, and he was kind of a ponce from the very beginning. But he didn't do anything to deserve what has happened to him, I think.
Well, I mean, because at least when he burned those boys, which again, I would never defend as a righteous act or anything like that. It was terrible, horrible, an evil act for sure. But those children died with at least their identity intact, per se. He's been beaten to the point he's no longer who he was. Which I think is, he can't have sex. It's pretty dang terrible. So, I want to touch on Dalton. I know last week you tweeted and talked a little bit about kind of our analysis when we talked about the Jaime Cersei rape scene, and Austin touched on some bigger themes of the way that the show dehumanizes human beings as a whole, and the way that human life as a whole, not just men or women, have been cheapened. And I was wondering if we wanted to dive into that conversation this week while we're all on together, or if you guys had any commentary on such a fact.
Austin, I really feel like you put a pin in this conversation, and it's hard not to talk about the season without talking about that scene. Obviously, I mean, the director, I don't think, intended for it to be rape. I think it was just a really terribly shot scene at the end of the day. But it does get back to this larger question of the value of life in Westeros, and it has very little. And I think that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that's what the show is trying to say, is that in this feudal society, human life really doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. But yeah, Austin, that's why I tweeted, and I really felt like you put a pin in it in quite a succinct way.
After we had that conversation last week, and I thank you for that, George R. R. Martin actually made a comment on it, kind of pertaining to the idea of dehumanization in the show and in the books. And he basically said that there is nothing in the books really that has not already happened in actual life, within history.
And it's happening now, yeah. Yeah,
and it's happening now. And I mean, you can see that, like, a lot of the scenes, a lot of the Red Wedding, all that stuff is based off historical events anyway. It is true, and I think it's a commentary from him on, while we see all these things and they're really horrible, these things are all really happening too. But yes, I do believe it is a general, like, dehumanization, but maybe it just highlights, what we're already doing. So
right, and I think Daniel touched on that a little bit last week too. I remember he talked about that this is Game of Thrones of Westeros is kind of a dark reflection of our own reality. These aren't the things, the rape that happens in the show, the slaughter of innocents that happens in the show. These are things that happen in our real world, and I think ultimately George R. R. Martin is trying to have us take a really close look at that and realize the atrocity of these acts, and hopefully we can kind of see that within ourselves and within our own society. Even if that rape scene had been intentional, I do think it was serving a much larger, greater point about human depravity and our own complexity as human beings, as opposed to just trying to be misogynistic, or a sense. We are looking at a world that cheapens human life, in a sense, because our world cheapens human life.
Really did appreciate, I know you guys touched on it last week a little bit, I did appreciate the AV Club article, Rape of Thrones, which it is an inflammatory title, but I think it's intended to get people to read it and get people thinking. And at the end of the day, I think, at the very least, that scene and the show are getting people talking about conversations that we need to have about, the nature of the value we put on people's personhood and their ability to live without fear, or there's the right to live without fear. So I think that's something important that we got out of all of this. Hopefully it doesn't just become, we've got a lot of scenes in the show that show human life being devalued. I mean, we have the rape pit at Craster's Keep. So hopefully the scene with Jaime and Cersei doesn't just serve to be more exploitation and more, look how bad everything is. Hopefully it does serve these characters and it does serve this plot, and it isn't just something that happened that we're all going to kind of forget about because, well, it's just Game of Thrones.
Even Adolf Hitler, because he's like the stereotypical worst human being who ever lived, would we really want to see him tortured like that for weeks? And
does he deserve it? Probably, but just kill him and get over with.
Exactly. I mean, there's some things that I think as human beings we should not celebrate, and I think the show goes out of its way to make sure that we are uncomfortable in those situations. All right, guys. Well, now that we're done talking about dehumanizing, rape, torture, and all that good stuff, let's go ahead and move on to Daenerys, who has a few issues of her own to deal with, as she realizes that, hey, we're paying justice with injustice. Oh wait, that's a really black and white mentality. Oh wait, I don't live in a black and white world where things are that simple. I thought this was a great scene, guys. I think Daenerys she's really growing on me this season, because last week we got her saying, I'm going to stand rule. And this week, now she's ruling, and she's like, crap, this isn't that easy. Now, she gets visited by a guest named, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, like 100%, this is not right, Hizdar Zolorak. who comes and says,
Can we just call him the Lorax?
The Lorax.
I'm game with that.
Let's do that. The Lorax basically comes and says, "Hey, you nail my father to a post, and I want to bury him in the grave because guess what? Even if he was, first off, two things. One, even if he was a horrible human being, he deserves to be buried by tradition because that's just the culture we live in, and that's how we do things. And two,
and she's now the caretaker of that culture,
and she is the caretaker of a culture she does not understand." Which is interesting. We're getting into some colonization here. And two, he actually voted against nailing the slave girls to the post, but was overruled. So that goes to show that slave owners are bad. We get that. But how many of those slave owners are truly guilty to the point where they deserve to be nailed to a post and killed like that? Yes, the culture is guilty for doing this to people, to making people slaves, to again dehumanizing human beings, but it's not to the same degree. This maybe Mr. Lorax's father was actually just a product of the culture as opposed to an actual violator of human rights per se.
A few things here. One, I don't trust this guy. This guy's totally manipulating her because he knows he can. Two, I feel like it was a horrible oversight to just hang anybody and not the people who were actually involved in the decision of these children. Because I actually totally support in the world of Essos, I guess, the crucifixion and kind of the eye for the eye mentality, because I feel like that's kind of the world they live in anyway. But she didn't do it to the right people, which is ridiculous. And then three, there is a point at which you should take them down and allow them to be buried. The punishment has been dealt. It's kind of over at this point, and I think she recognizes that.
Well, I think we're all glossing over one of the best parts of this whole sequence, and that's the sequence I like to call "A dragon doesn't want to be fed; he wants to hunt."
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
We get more, and again, these dragons kind of show Daenerys' conquest. She's realizing she can't control her dragons as much as she thought she could, and she's realizing she can't control Slaver's Bay just through force. She has to be a little bit more measured, and she has to try and understand this culture and work with these people if she wants to. And that's what she decides not to sail to King's Landing, even though she thinks she might be able to take it. She wants to learn something about what it means to be a ruler.
Yeah, these are these moments where, I know for Caleb, I do like Dany, and I know that I've spoken against her several times, but these are the scenes that, where I find my frustration with her. Like, hey, you didn't really think about, you kind of just overlooked all the, putting up, maybe all these people weren't for the children on a cross or whatever. And I hope that she really learns from this. I hope that this is a moment where she can say, okay, this is what I did wrong, and this is how I can improve that in the future. And I think she's going to. And I really do like Dany. I just have those few moments that really frustrate me about her. But I hope, and I think that this is going to be one of those moments for her. But also, I hope that we get to see her discuss the whole dragon thing, because we didn't really get to see her sort of make any statement or whatever about that. And so I want to see what she has to say about that. Just that her dragons are kind of just going wherever they want and doing whatever. Again, she doesn't have control of them, and she doesn't necessarily have control of the situation like she thought she did. She is starting to, like Caleb said at the beginning, she is starting to grow on me a little bit. I'm really excited again to see where this story is headed.
I mean, the things that make me most interested about her is now that, yes, she kicked ass, she took down slave cities for a season and a half, and that was a lot of fun. She was Superman. She was the idealist. She was going in and doing all this great stuff, and from an ideology perspective, that's great. You were setting a high bar for which we all strive for. But now she's realizing, crap. Being really idealistic doesn't really work on a practical level. Yeah, sure, you're changing the world, but you're not really changing it in a better way, because you've got all these pragmatic issues. This is why Batman and Superman make a great combo. You get your pragmatist and your idealist. Mother of Dragons sounds epic. She is pretty dang epic. She's got dragons. That's cool. We love that. But those dragons those really aren't the most practical way to conquer a kingdom if you can't control them. They're unpredictable. And as cool as it is that they have dragons, do you really want these dragons, going and burning whole cities? I mean, let's look at Harrenhal. And if she can't control them, what are they going to do when she gets to Westeros? Yes, listeners, I'm challenging you. I'm saying Mother of Dragons is pretty awesome, but she's not. Those mothers are going to grow up and be angsty teenagers one day, and they're going to start burning cities down because that's what angsty teenagers do. Do you really want to be behind a leader that has angsty teenagers, 3 of them at our cusp?
The only thing that makes teenagers worse is the ability to breathe fire.
That's a very, very good point.
All right.
I just want to point out. I want to point out one thing before we move on, Caleb. This is directed at you. When the White Walkers get across the wall, you're gonna want dragons there. That's all I'm saying.
We're going to take a quick Q&A break. Now, I want to go ahead and first off state that you can always follow us at facebook.com/castbeyondthewall. There you can feel free to chime in, leave us a comment, send us a message, send us questions. We love that. Like our stuff, share our stuff. We like all that stuff.
Well said.
Stuff. So that's a great way to stay in contact with us. Now, the other way in which Mr. Dalton Stuart has been a frequent contributor to the show has been through the Twitter, which you can follow us on Twitter at cast_beyond_GOT. If you want to go ahead and tweet us comments and feedback that way.
Why do you say it like an old person? The Twitter.
It's the Twitterverse, Austin.
The Twitters.
The Twitters. Twitters. The Twitters. Twitterverse. The. You put the in front of it, it sounds cooler.
Drop the. Just Facebook. It's cleaner.
And you can subscribe to our YouTube page, which actually we've picked up a number of subscribers the last few weeks, and I want to say thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed. We've actually had a few people leave some comments during our live broadcast, so thank you guys so much. Continue to subscribe to us via the YouTube. And lastly, we actually have a fully complete, fully operational iTunes page, which you can find us at. Go look us up at the Cast Beyond the Wall on iTunes. I'll leave you a link in the page below. Please go ahead and subscribe, review, give us 1 star if we suck, 4 stars if we're awesome. I don't really care. You can think we're the worst podcast on the face of Game of Thrones, Westeros. That's cool.
Don't give us 1 star. Don't do that.
I'll take 1 star over just ignoring us, okay? And I just want to remind everyone that we are presented by our partner at WeGotThisCovered.com. They are an excellent source for video game, movie, and TV news. And like I said, they have some awesome Game of Thrones recaps I think everyone should check out that are actually up before our fellow reviewers at IGN or Variety or any of these other number of websites. Things you should check out. WeGotThisCovered.com. It's a great source. I actually have been reading quite a few reviews there these days, and I hear it's pretty good. You could say, Austin, what could you say?
They have everything on their site.
No, you're supposed to say they got it covered.
They have all the things there.
Mr. Stoll, what could you say about this website?
They cover you with things.
Daniel Stoll, you're my last hope.
They got it covered.
Ah, there we go. We got it covered. All right, well, we'll go ahead and start with some feedback. I actually post this on my movie review. I post every episode we have on my online portfolio, my movie review blog, mastersfilmreview.wordpress.com, and I don't get comments very often. But this week, I finally got a first comment. I was really excited. I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and we can discuss it a little bit because it involves Littlefinger, which Caleb loves to talk about Littlefinger all the time. Our reader said, I will say, in response to Caleb, I think part of the reason the big reveal came across as something less than mind-blowing is that by the time it was unveiled that Baelish had not only been well established as a schemer of the highest order, but that Joffrey's death had shown us that there wasn't a single person in Baelish's orbit who should be thought untouchable by the hand of Littlefinger. We already knew he was capable of kingslaying, so it was unsurprising to learn that he'd also taken out a king's hand in the past. This isn't an unassuming guy here. This is the closest we have to a full-on mustache twirler, and even if he's more like a guy who creates chaos and improvises a way to raise his position than a puppet master controlling everything. That said, what guest host Jessica Barton, was saying about how this feels like a politically unstable world, even without Baelish meddling anyway. So it's not like we'd assume the realm would be living in peaceful harmony if he hadn't done his deed. This was already a powder keg under the whole thing. And if Littlefinger hadn't lit it, the fuse, someone else would have. He just used it to his advantage.
Well said.
Yeah, very good.
I totally agree. Absolutely 100% agree. And we talked about it a little bit last week. Baelish or not, Westeros was going up in flames.
I agree. I just don't think it would have been to the same scale. But obviously, Joffrey being a terrible king and, killing lots of people. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that there would have been some war of some sort, even if it wouldn't have been the War of the Five Kings. Dalton, you're the guest host here who doesn't get to chime in on all our thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on this comment?
I'd say like gravity, all Westeros took was a little push. I mean, it was already teetering on the brink for sure. I would agree with that. But I mean, Littlefinger. I mean, say what you will about him, he is the one that set all of this into motion. The reveal, I'd agree, isn't really all that shocking. You're like, okay, yeah, that checks out. That sounds like Littlefinger. But I definitely just shows the depths he's willing to go to create the chaos so he can start the climb.
I always viewed it a lot like World War I, where everyone's kind of itching to fight anyway, and everyone's just looking for an excuse.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, you said it wasn't very surprising, I guess, Dalton. So you weren't particularly surprised when it was like you found out he had done it.
No, not particularly. It wasn't something I put together on my own. But learning it, I was like, okay, yeah, that checks out. I mean, that's not that shocking.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and move on to King's Landing, and we're going to spend the rest of the show talking about King's Landing. But man, there was a lot of great stuff going on there this week. Let's go ahead and start off. As we alluded to earlier this episode, the Small Council is back, made up this time by Tywin Lannister, Oberyn Martell, Varys, whatever his last name is, and whatever his name is, Tyrell. That guy.
Mace Tyrell.
Mace Tyrell.
The hairy thumb. That's what he is.
The butt kisser.
These meetings aren't always going to be this early, are they? I was up late last night. So, does this mean I am a master of something now? Coins, ships...
Lord Tywin and I already determined that I shall be the master of ships, long before you. Lord Tywin, it's a great honour to have been granted a seat on this council.
Trial begins this afternoon. We only have the morning for affairs of state. So shall we begin?
Sandor Clegane has been spotted in the Riverlands, my lord.
A coward and a traitor.
My birds tell me the hound slaughtered 5 of our soldiers. I believe the phrase, "fuck the king," was uttered.
Disgraceful.
I was really annoyed that I had to listen to Grand Maester Pycelle talk because I can't freaking stand him.
Oh, God. Yep. That's about all.
He actually might be one of my least favorite characters.
He really should die soon. I would really like for that to happen.
You know what? I don't care who I said who my least favorite character was before, whenever I said that, Grandmaster Pycelle is easily my least favorite character. He's annoying. He's obnoxious. He does what Varys does, except for instead of being really cool and calm and smart about it, and quiet about it, he jumps sides and is really loud and obnoxious about it. He's like, "Yeah, Cersei, what you said, treason is treason," or whatever. He just jumps sides every time, and it's obnoxious, and he sucks.
You know who could replace him though? Is Oberyn. He knows poisons.
He does know poisons.
We could kill off Pycelle and have Oberyn all the time. That would be amazing. Yeah, not a big fan of the Pycelle. We also got to see Mace Tyrell being a giant tool bag, as normal.
Well, it was so funny.
Surprising no one.
Yeah, no one. Tywin's just like, grab me some pen and paper, and he's like, yes, master.
The total disrespect of Mace Tyrell is just hilarious by everyone. It's quite funny and enjoyable for me, and it's like he's totally oblivious to it. He's like, I get to be master of ships. This has already been discussed before you ever came.
Such a tool bag.
Oh, Grand Maester Pycelle, you should know that Oberyn is always coming.
Oh. Gosh.
So someone listed all the questions that Oberyn asked in this episode. And he seriously asked the best questions of anybody. It's hilarious stuff.
And did you?
Did I what?
Fuck him like it was his last night in this world.
He's like, do I get to be master of coin, master of ships? And then throughout the trial, he's asking hilarious things. But we got to see a little bit of Varys' skills, who talks a little bit about Daenerys and the Hound. And kind of just an update for everyone of what's going on. I will say that Varys is a really, really convenient plot device. That's what he is.
Okay, he actually is a character, but he is the spider. And let's just I always have to remind people, what does Varys do? He's the guy who's got spies everywhere. everywhere.
It's true. It's true.
So
but he has a purpose. He has a literary purpose, and it is to move the plot forward in King's Landing.
Well, not necessarily move forward,
For
but
sure.
it's to tie what's going on in Westeros to what's going on over in Essos. And again, I think this is really great because he is also. It makes sense. Okay, if you were the president of the United States and you were okay with the NSA, would you want the leader of the NSA on your team?
If it's Varys, then absolutely.
I think the Lannisters have gotten far too comfortable in their position, and I think their downfall is coming very, very soon. I do.
Interesting.
I found it very interesting, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit more at the trial, that the entire War of the Five Kings has come down to like a family fight. Like that's what it's like degenerated into. It's just a fight between family members. It started off as this giant epic thing, and now it's this.
Well, it was a lot easier for them to fight together when they were united to fight three different enemies. Now they don't really have enemies to fight, so they're just fighting amongst themselves.
Exactly, and it's going to rip them apart. And I think they're going to lose everything for it.
Yeah, but back to the scene. I will say I did like that. We even got little tie-ins like, hey, Mormont. They mentioned Mormont. They mentioned Barristan, the Unsullied. All these things, so that they actually are pretty tuned into to some degree, what's going on over with Daenerys, and yet they still kind of don't decide on exactly what they're going to do.
I mean, it does kind of serve as a buffer to be like, okay, that was what was happening in the rest of the world, and now we're back to King's Landing. So, it's a fun scene, but it does just kind of serve to join the two halves of the episode together.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and we move into another really fun scene between Varys and Oberyn, where Oberon's basically trying to guess, okay, do you have sex with women, men, goats? I had you pegged as a gay guy, but I'm really not sure here. He's playing Queer Eye. He's playing Queer Eye for the straight guy here, and he doesn't exactly win in flying colors.
Oh, Tom, why don't we take the bridge?
Feel free to put your floaties on and swim there, pumpkin.
Oh, you know I don't swim. Hi, we're gonna be out of season before we get there.
Yeah, guys, I think maybe we should hoof it.
All things just keep getting better.
His radar is definitely a little bit off, yeah.
Varys, you gotta work on that. Varys, you gotta work on that gaydar a little bit, man.
Because Varys is just like, no, man, I don't care. I see all of the I mean, he has to hang out with Jaime and Cersei all the time, so he knows how much of a distraction that can be, even if he did have an interest before he had his parts taken from him.
Again, brings in the question, what is Varys' game here? And he says, well, I don't really have... I can't have sex, can't have wife, can't have kids, can't have a real job, can't do this, but not having any of these things has allowed me to focus on other things. And then he looks at the throne. What do you guys think? Do you really think Varys' endgame is the throne?
See, that's the thing he's done this before, right? In other scenes, he did it with Littlefinger, but always it's been, I do everything I do for the good of the realm. I do it for the good of the people. Always. And this is the first hint where we get to see where he has some bigger ambitions than that. I think he does want the throne. And I know he's said before that he does not, but that's probably just to play it off for Littlefinger and things like that. But I do think he wants it, just like everyone else.
I don't think it's so much wanting the throne as wanting some say in who's on the throne. Because I think he realizes that there's no way he could be king because he's a eunuch. I think he realizes that there's no conceivable world in which he gets to be king, but he is very invested in who is on the throne. I think that's what that exchange is really about. Is he's invested in the Iron Throne, if not for his own gain.
So he's like Karl Rove. He doesn't really want the throne, but he wants to control who's ever on the throne.
Exactly,
Karl Rove.
Yeah, I would agree with Dalton there. I don't think he necessarily wants to be on the throne, but I think he definitely does care about who gets to sit on it. But it's interesting because, as far as I can remember, he doesn't make very big moves, such as we see like Littlefinger making, like huge moves to do things. The way that he plays the game is through the knowledge that he acquires and who he tells what and what he allows out there and what he does not allow out there. And it's not like making these active, huge decisions that affect the realm. It's very slowly letting people know certain things, not letting people know other things, and things like that is how he plays that game. And I think it's just very different than a lot of other people choose to play the game, which is very interesting.
I mean, he's always going to be behind the scenes, I think, throwing his support behind various people. But ultimately, he's going to look out for himself. I mean, we see that a little bit this week. He did support Tyrion, and this week, not so much.
So, no, yeah, I think Varys is not necessarily the one to make the big moves. But he's all about maintaining that position. But I feel like ultimately he is going to have to. He's holding that position for a reason, right? Like he's maintaining himself as Master of the Whisperers through 3 kings now, 4 kings now. He's on his 4th king, so that he can do something at some point, right? Or am I just crazy?
I mean, he's no different than Maester Pycelle in that he's just kind of hanging around, doing his thing. But I mean, he does definitely make some moves here and there. Nothing big. He doesn't make big waves. It will be interesting to see if he actually starts to try to position himself to move up, because he hasn't done that to this point.
Right, and like Austin just alluded to, they're not in the things that he moves that he does make are very small, very low risk moves. They don't change the world of Westeros majorly, like a death of Joffrey, something like that.
But let's go ahead and move on to the real event of the episode, the last 15, 20 minutes of the episode, which was the trial. Tyrion's trial that we've been building up to ever since Joffrey died. And guys, there was a lot of really great stuff going on here. Do you guys have anything you want to say before we get specific?
I just really, really loved this scene. It was by far my favorite, and I think that's going to be the case for almost everybody. I hate Shay. Just, golly, man. I hate her. That's kind of all I got to say for it. I just thought it was a really, really highlight of the season, too. Yeah.
People were talking about this a little bit, aside from myself, but I think this is, like, we had the Red Wedding, we had Blackwater, we had Ned Stark's beheading. I think this is one of the big set pieces of the show, is this trial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's up there among them. I mean, it's not as flashy as some of the others, but I think the production value and the way this was directed and all around, I think this is up there among the best set pieces of the show, for sure.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I want to go ahead and say that, yeah, this is one of those big iconic moments of Game of Thrones. Like you said, major set piece that when the show is done, the books are finished, this is going to be one of those highlights. You're going to look back at season 3 and 4, book 3 or whatever, and say, there was the Red Wedding and then there was Tyrion's trial. And I think it was really great. One thing I want to highlight is that, one of the reasons we asked the question, who is the smartest man in Westeros at the beginning of the show, was because we were thinking that Tyrion would have been a lot of our answers. Or at least he would have been in the top 5 beforehand. And maybe he still is. But I think this episode kind of goes to show that he's not quite as smart as he thought he was, because he said all these things that in the moment seemed like a great move. And we were all behind him too when he did all these things.
We were cheering him on.
We were cheering him on, and we know he was, and to some degree we know he was right, or at least think he was right. But now, in the world of Game of Thrones, the moments we cheered him on have all come to bite him in the butt. When he backstabbed Master Pycelle, when he protected Sansa against Sir Meryn.
With the exception of Shay, everything that pretty much everyone said was true. Everything they said happened. He said all these things. He did all these things.
Right.
And ultimately was not very smart and did not play the game very well, even though we thought in the moment, oh yeah, he's doing great, he's manipulating all these people.
Well, I mean, the moment with Master Pycelle, if you guys want to go back and watch that again, I mean, where he was like, he told 3 different people about 3 different marriages he was going to marry Myrcella to, and that seemed like a genius move. But the way it played out ultimately came back to bite him in the butt, and that's really, really sad that a character that we love so much could get in such deep doo-doo, essentially.
It's kind of a reflection of Ned Stark back in season 1, and seeing somebody that we were really rooting for, and watching all of these things that seemed like good moves at the time kind of come back and be their downfall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much like Ned Stark.
And I wonder how that sort of theme is going to play out. Is Peter Baelish going to suffer a similar fate, or where you think, wow, he made all these great moves and no one was able to catch him, and all of a sudden it all comes back.
Right. It's like in hindsight, and I think Dalton's onto something right there. I mean, at the time when we were watching season 1 the first time, we were totally behind Ned Stark and what he was doing. We thought that was the right thing to do. And then obviously, in hindsight, I mean, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Wow, I can't believe he did that. That was really stupid. And Here we are with Tyrion doing the same thing for 3 seasons. We saw him making all these moves that have finally come back to bite him in the butt now.
And we knew Pycelle, Meryn, and Cersei were gonna speak poorly against him.
Right.
And we did know Varys was going to too, but we also knew that Varys supported Tyrion at some point, and to see that happen was sad.
After we received word of Robb Stark's death, he didn't seem gladdened by the news. Perhaps his marriage to Sansa Stark had made him more sympathetic to the Northern cause.
You're excused, Lord Varys.
Father, may I ask the witness one question?
One.
You once said that without me, the city would have faced certain defeat. You said the histories would never mention me, but you would not forget. Have you forgotten, Lord Varys?
Sadly, my lord, I never forget a thing.
There are a lot of betrayals in this whole sequence that are just really, really upsetting.
I was just gonna say, I just feel, like you said, Tyrion's by far one of the most favorite characters on the show, and I just, in this moment, it's just heart-wrenching. Like, it literally is like heart-wrenching. I felt so bad for Tyrion, just knowing where his heart is and knowing how hard he honestly tried to, be a good person and yet still, survive, but still try and be a good person in this world and do what's best for what with the family and the realm and all these things, knowing where, who he truly is, and just having this. He, of all people in Westeros, does not deserve this, and he is the one that's having to receive the all these betrayals and things like that. It's just really heart-wrenching. I really feel like it's just a really depressing moment for him and his character.
This guy can't just get a break, right? So he had to marry Sansa against his will. He is now framed for poisoning Joffrey, and now he has to suffer through a trial in which there's no breaks. It's just making it worse, making you realize how crappy your life is.
That swears to, like, the one person in the world that, like, apparently stuck by him and swears to love him, the one person that he loves and trusted and cared about more than anything. He thought he had even made her safe, comes back to not just stab him in the back, but like just destroy him.
Twist the knife so deep. Oh man, you can't even. Yeah.
It was interesting to see the proceedings contrasted with the American justice system, as flawed as it may be. Tyrion doesn't really get a chance to defend himself at all.
No.
Like, he doesn't get a chance. There's no cross-examination. There's nothing unless Tywin says it's okay. You see this in the next scene, actually, with Jaime and Tywin. It's a farce. The whole thing is a farce.
You'd condemn your own son to death. I've condemned no one. The trial is not over.
This isn't a trial, it's a farce. Cersei has manipulated everything, and you know it.
I know nothing of the sort.
You've always hated Tyrion.
He killed his king.
As did I. Do you know the last order the Mad King gave me? To bring him your head. I saved your life so you could murder my brother.
It won't be murder, it'll be justice.
Justice?
I'm performing my sworn duty as Hand of the King. If Tyrion is found guilty, he will be punished accordingly.
He'll be executed.
No, he'll be punished accordingly.
It's set up to manipulate people and kill Tyrion. That's all we're doing this for, and it's all just for show.
Do you guys think this is a good deal?
I think this is what Tywin had planned all along. I don't think he ever intended to execute Tyrion. He was always just going to send him to the wall. And I think when he realized there was a way to play Jaime's love for Tyrion against him, he capitalized on that by getting what he wanted out of Jaime. So he wins in two ways. He gets rid of Tyrion, and he also gets Jaime back doing what he wants. I think this was all... Tywin doesn't care that Joffrey is dead. He knows his family's better off without him. This is a way for him to get what he wants.
Yeah.
While I do believe that, yes, this was Tywin's plan all along, I also believe that he would absolutely execute Tyrion. I don't think he'd have any problem with that whatsoever. He even states kind of earlier in the season, or maybe it was last season, he's like, my biggest regret was not, casting you into the ocean or something, I believe he said. He would have absolutely no problem killing Tyrion, I think. But he also knew that Jaime loves Tyrion and that this would be his opportunity to really secure his heir and force him to be what Tywin wants him to be. So.
And it's again, Tywin turning a family tragedy into something very positive for the family and using that to their advantage. And Tywin's just good at doing that.
Tywin likes to capitalize on his family misery. That's pretty great, Tywin. Good on you, buddy. Best dad in the world.
And to answer your question, I think it is a good deal. I guess. I mean, I don't think that's that big of a deal to Jaime. Like, can you really feel that bad for him? He gets to be like a lord of one of the most respected houses in Westeros. Like, I know that's not what he wanted, and that's the whole reason he joined the Kingsguard, so he didn't have to do that. I guess there's a lot worse situations he could be in. I guess he could have. For example, he could be at the wall. That would suck.
Yeah, that's fine. But I'm talking, and I think I didn't look at it that way. Thinking in terms of Jaime, sure. But what about Tyrion? I think the worst thing could possibly happen to Tyrion ever. I almost think going to the wall would be a fate worse than death, almost for him, because he can't sleep with women. He can't drink. He can drink, but he can't. He can't be who he is. He can't. His intelligence won't really get him very far. Yeah, I know. He can be a strategist. He can be a Lord Commander, sure. But his intelligence wouldn't really be put to use in the same way it is in King's Landing.
I think Tyrion would be Lord Commander of the Wall in about a week.
Yeah, I totally agree. There were all those downsides to Tyrion potentially being at the Wall, which I don't think will happen.
No.
I have my own theories about where he'll end up, but we can talk about that later. He also has a sense of adventure a little bit. We saw that a little bit in like the very first episode or maybe it's the second episode, where he ends up at the Wall. He's talking about things and he wants to see the world a little bit. I think he would adapt well, I guess. Having been through Blackwater and done and accomplished the things that he's accomplished, I think he would adapt well if he had to be there.
I think that's a fair point, is that Tyrion would be very good at adapting. Why I also see, Caleb, your point. For Tyrion, I don't know. I think he would, for Tyrion's character, I could see him saying something like, I don't want to be at the Wall. I'd rather just die. I could see him saying something like that. But in the end, he'll take it. Yeah, I see both sides of that a little bit, I guess.
Shay, did you guys see this coming? Let's just put this first. Did you see this coming? I know Dalton and Austin haven't read the book yet. Did you guys see this coming?
I really was pretty surprised. I wasn't surprised when she walked in. I was like, okay, I know how this is going to unfold. But seeing her show up was pretty shocking, and it was really heartbreaking. And you could see just how she never really had an understanding of what he was trying to do. And even if she did, she wasn't willing to do that. And the betrayal that she feels, we all talk about how Tyrion's trying to do the right thing and is always making the smart play, but we do get to see here the human cost of that, sometimes you don't want to be a pawn in someone doing the right thing and being this benevolent figure to you. You want your own path, and you see her really lash out against him for that. And it was really heartbreaking.
Tyrion Lannister.
How do you know him?
I was handmaiden to his wife, Lady Sansa.
This man stands accused of murdering King Joffrey. What do you know of this?
I know that he's guilty. He and Sansa planned together.
Silence! Continue.
She wanted revenge for her father, her mother, her brother. She blamed their deaths on the king. Tyrion was happy to help. He hated Joffrey. He hated the queen. He hated you, my lord. He stole poison from the Grand Mesa's chamber to put in Joffrey's wine.
How could you possibly know all this? Why would he reveal such plans to his wife's maid?
I wasn't just her maid. I was his whore.
I beg your pardon? You said you were his...
His whore.
I did not see it coming from the trial perspective. I never believed that Bronn actually got her to the boat. I still don't believe that. I believe Bronn sold her out because someone gave him more money than Tyrion was able to offer him because he's a bastard. She is either incredibly stupid and did not realize what he was trying to do for her, or incredibly spiteful and does not appreciate what he was trying to do for her. At least that's the way I see it. I can understand why she'd be hurt, but she surely has to recognize that he did what he did because he loved her. And when we saw the scene where he sends her away and she's crying and stuff, I always contended that she was crying because she was sad that she knows this is her only choice, not because she actually believed any of the words that were coming out of his mouth. With what happens in this trial, I no longer feel that's the case. I think she just totally didn't get it.
You know, Austin, I would love to have more faith in Shay's intelligence than I currently have, and believe your point, but I honestly think she's pretty dang stupid. You always get that hint from her that she's a little smarter than she lets on. Particularly in the first season when they're playing that drinking game and she actually kind of sticks up for herself a few times. You're like, oh, this girl's pretty smart. The way things have unfolded in King's Landing, how selfish she's been, and reckless is probably better than selfish. Reckless she's been with Tyrion and not realizing the danger that she's put herself in. And she's honestly, by taking stand in this trial, yeah, sure, she probably got paid a lot of money to do this, but she's still in harm's way by a lot. I think she's not very. I don't think she's very smart. And honestly, I don't criticize the show very often. The show hasn't done an outstanding job at writing or acting her. That character is not particularly compelling in the books, and they give her more to do in the show than she did in the books. But I don't think they actually executed it very well. I actually like her less. She's given more to do, but I think the way it's executed, I don't like her anymore for doing any of it.
This testimony from her should have been, while it was heart-wrenching to kind of see and feel Tyrion's reaction to it, I didn't feel that from her performance, and it should have been. It should have been a kind of hateful, spiteful kind of thing that she was doing. Either that, or she should have came off as super reluctant and like sad that she had to be doing it. I was forced in that position, and I got neither of that from her.
I think your takeaways are valid, but I did really appreciate that. It worked for me very well, and I did enjoy the performance. I think some of her deliveries have been hit and miss throughout her time on the show, but that scene was really effective for me, and in a way that I don't think it was for you guys.
I never thought she was incredibly smart by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think she's necessarily stupid either. But I do think she's incredibly naive, and I don't believe she ever. I know Tyrion told her several times, and maybe that's part of her being kind of stupid, I guess, that this was a dangerous place. I don't think she ever really bought that, or at least I don't feel like I got that from her, that she ever really was convinced about how dangerous Westeros really was. I'm not convinced she really fully realizes what she's doing up there. And I don't believe it's necessarily out of stupidity. I believe it's more out of being naive. And so when she's up there speaking, I feel more of she just thinks that she's getting back at Tyrion, but she doesn't realize that it has a very high potential of killing him. I don't think she realizes that. And so for me, the performance worked because I feel like she's being very naive up there, and she's just trying to get back at him for sending her off and all that stuff.
But yeah, I even though I didn't think the performance was necessarily in my initial reaction was mind blowing. What was mind blowing was the look on Peter Dinklage's face.
Oh my gosh, it was awful.
Oh, it was painful. I mean, in the worst. Gosh, man, I'm getting. Oof, it hurt right here. Is when he tells her to stop.
Shay. Please don't.
I am a whore. Remember? That was before he married Sansa. After that, all he wanted was her.
His face and his reaction really just made my heart sink.
It was probably the single worst betrayal, I think, in the show. In no other circumstance can I remember someone being so close to somebody and turning on them like that.
I think it does really stand apart. And I mean, we've seen a lot of betrayals. I mean, Littlefinger and Stark, but I mean, I think, yeah, this is the most personal. Well, even Theon and the Starks, but I think, yeah, this is the most personal backstab we've ever seen, and it is really, tragic on a level that these other betrayals, the Red Wedding, all these other backstabbings and machinations we see going on. This one is one motivated purely by personal feeling, and I think that's what kind of brings it a weight that really sets it apart from the other betrayals we see.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for Tyrion, out of all the betrayals we've seen, for him it is just such a personal. I've never been entirely convinced that Shae loved him entirely. I do believe that Tyrion loved her entirely, and for him, I think that this betrayal is just it just breaks him. I think, and yeah, he just can't. I think it literally broke his heart, and you could feel that from him and from Peter Dinklage's performance, which was fantastic.
After the heartbreak, we witnessed probably one of the most brilliant performances in the whole show. Period.
Yeah.
Peter Dinklage literally just blew my mind.
Favorite speech of the show ever.
Yeah.
Yes, Father, I'm guilty. Guilty? Is that what you want to hear?
You admit you poisoned the king?
No. Of that I'm innocent. I'm guilty of a far more monstrous crime. I'm guilty of being a dwarf.
You are not on trial for being a dwarf.
Oh, yes I am. I've been on trial for that my entire life.
Have you nothing to say in your defense?
Nothing but this. I did not do it. I did not kill Joffrey, but I wish that I had. Watching your vicious bastard die gave me more relief than 1,000 lying whores. I wish I was the monster you think I am. I wish I had enough poison for the whole pack of you. I would gladly give my life to watch you all swallow it.
Samarin! Samarin, escort the prisoner back to his cell.
I will not give my life for Joffrey's murder, and I know I'll get no justice here, so I will let the gods decide my fate. I demand a trial by combat.
I mean, I've read that chapter where he gives that speech a couple of times, and the way they wrote it, the way that Peter Dinklage executed that was so masterful, and it exceeded even my really high expectations of what was going down. And gosh, the emotional charge coming off that, man, I get chills just thinking about it.
And for the people who haven't read the books, someone had posted online this particular passage. The whole portion where he talks about, I saved all of you. That whole portion, I should have let you die, was actually all in his head. He doesn't say that out loud, but it was so good when he says that. He says it with such venom and spite. It was amazing.
Well, he realizes he has nothing to lose, I think, and he's, at that moment with Shae, I think, breaks him, because he was kind of bemused by this trial. I mean, he knew that it could end his life potentially, but he was just kind of taking it in stride, as he often does. But man, he just comes out guns blazing. I think it is that ultimate betrayal that he gets from Shae that just allows him to just be like, fuck all of you. I'm done. I'm washing my hands of Westeros, and I wish I had let Joffrey kill every last one of you.
Yeah.
But he defends to the end. He said, I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
I didn't do it. I wish I had.
That's the part that really gives me chills. It's just he's like, I wish I had done this. You all deserve so much worse for letting this happen. But no, I didn't do it. But you should all die, every single last one of you. In the line, sing your he was looking at Cersei when he says it, sing your bastard die, give me more relief than 1,000 lying whores. I was just like, damn.
That was the first person to say public. Yeah. That was the first person to say publicly, essentially, that Joffrey was a bastard. No one else has ever really called out in a public forum like that in the show, at least, that he's not a legitimate Baratheon, probably neither of any of your other children. It was pretty awesome.
I mean, it's definitely the Emmy reel bit. I mean, yeah, he just knocks it out of the park, and it just goes to show you what a great actor Peter Dinklage is. I mean, and in getting this moment that I'm sure he was able to draw on his real life experience with. I've been on trial my entire life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, there's just so much weight in what he says, and you feel every second of it. And it's just masterclass acting. I mean, truly.
And it's totally the truth too. If he was not a dwarf, as he said, Tywin would embrace him as a son.
Yeah.
Because he's Tywin's protege. He is Tywin Jr.
He's more Tywin than any of the other Lannisters. Far away.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
Not
absolutely.
even close. So I mean, he's exactly right. The only reason this has ever come to this is because he's a dwarf. That's the only reason Cersei hates him. That's the only reason Tywin will ever allow this to happen. Could you imagine? And Jaime even points to this fact: I killed my king too. No one would ever put me on trial for it because I'm Jaime Lannister. But because this is Tyrion, because he is a dwarf, that's why he's on trial.
Yeah, and
it's totally the truth.
And I gotta say, Peter Dinklage, man, he blows it away. Guys, the Emmys this year are gonna be a show between Matthew McConaughey and the send-off for Breaking Bad with Bryan Cranston and this scene from Peter Dinklage. Man, it's gonna be one heck of a fight for those Emmy votes.
I'm sorry. I'm just imagining McConaughey's character Rust from True Detective being in Game of Thrones in some capacity, and it's delightful.
Why should I live in history, huh? I don't want to know anything anymore. This is a world where nothing is solved. When someone once told me time is a flat circle. Everything we've ever done or will do, we're going to do over and over and over again.
I see it and it delights me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Trial by combat. That's what he calls for.
Mm-hmm.
Does two questions. One, does Tyrion fight for himself? And two, if he doesn't, who is the champion?
I think, he went with trial by combat because it's his only recourse. It's his ultimate way of saying, I have no regard for this trial. I don't think he's going to fight for himself. I mean, it's definitely possible we might actually see that. I don't know if they'll allow him the champion. If they do, I wouldn't be surprised if we have to see Bronn and Jaime go up against each other. I wouldn't be surprised if the Crown picks Jaime as their champion and he goes back to his old standby Bronn. Although it could go the other way entirely. Jaime could volunteer to be his champion. So
I would actually predict the opposite scenario where Jaime volunteers for Tyrion and Bronn fights for the crown.
I cannot, in good conscience, tell you guys exactly what's going to go down. But I will say,
all right,
it might be totally unrelated. It might be totally unrelated.
Stance as Caleb in this situation.
But I will say that I've talked to a lot of book readers, and I have to kind of agree with them that the fight we see, oh god, I'm so excited!
Yeah.
The fight that we're gonna see is more anticipated than episode 9 of any season. It is like one of the. This is one of the. And I know I talked about Tyrion's Trial being one of the most iconic books, but this fight is literally one of the most exciting, most anticipated, and iconic moments of the whole series, far and away. Not just given because of who it is, but because of the circumstances and because of the things that are at stake, because of said fight. And it's one of those things. It's all
there
or nothing.
Are so many great possibilities.
Yeah,
there are so many great possibilities. Imagine they make Shay fight Tyrion.
When I read that part of the book, it was more exciting, more shocking, more stunning, more mind-blowing than anything else I'd ever read, including the Red Wedding and things like that. Just the way that it happens and everything is just so. As soon as I read it, I was ready to watch it. Like, there's just no way to describe it. Like,
I described the Red Wedding like this, and I think I've described a couple other scenes like this in my history of the podcasting on the show. There are some scenes that when you're reading them, your adrenaline is pumping so hard that when you're reading it, it's playing like a movie in your head, and you're just like, I have never you're like literally sitting there talking out loud to the book. You're like, no. What the? You're like your adrenaline is just shooting through the roof, and there are so few books that can capture that. And this fight, whoever it may be, will in fact capture that feeling, and I cannot wait to see the show do it.
Well, I'm pretty sure we're not seeing it next week. I think it's going to be. I do believe it's going to be an episode 8 thing, just based on the previews for next week. We saw nothing to hint at that it happens. In fact, all we see is Tyrion talking to Jaime, saying, "You have no faith in me," or something. So,
do you think the trial by combat move by Tyrion is a good move or bad move?
I think it's actually a great move because he realizes that there's no way he's walking out of this guilty. And if he takes the trial by combat, at the very least, he has the ability to take some agency for what's going to happen.
It's an interesting move. It'll at least be more exciting. But now here, an outcome can only be so. Say he wins, okay? Say he wins, the best possible outcome, and he's off. He can't stay in Westeros. He either has to go to the Wall or he has to go to Essos, which I'm totally for. He can go to Essos and hang out with Daenerys. It'll be amazing. But I don't know that it's really a good move because I don't feel like the outcome's going to be that different.
That's a good point.
Well, we'll see. I guess I mean it from the perspective of the fact that Jaime had walked over and said to Tyrion,
exactly.
Hey,
he was going to go to the Wall,
right? And
exactly. He was going to go to the Wall with Jaime, and now he may end up at the Wall anyway. Even if he wins, he may end up at the Wall because it's the only safe place for him to be if he wins.
Yeah, and just for me, when I saw the look on Jaime's face, Jaime is extremely scared once he sees that, when he hears that Tyrion says this, and even Tywin has that look of not necessarily full confidence, I guess you could say, because there's just so many possibilities that could happen from this.
Yeah, well, and my thing is, here's what I really felt like was going on in this scene. I felt like this was Tyrion giving Tywin the bird, saying, "You've controlled me my whole life. I have done all this crap for you. And you know what? Now you want me to take the Night's Watch. Now you want to take the Black. Screw you. I'm going to do this my way. And if I die, at least I didn't die doing what you forced me to do. I am freaking Tyrion Lannister. Hear me roar, bitch."
I am the lion. No, so you mentioned Jaime's face when he says, "I want trial by combat." They do this little round table where they show everyone's reaction, and freaking Loras is sleeping. He's sleeping and he wakes up. He's like, "What? What's going on?"
I do think when this season's over, we've got 4 episodes left. There's not going to be a red wedding. There will be 5 things. There will be 5, and we are only on 2. We've only gotten 2 of them. There are going to be 5. There's not going to be Ned Stark getting executed. There's not going to be Blackwater. There's not going to be Red Wedding. There's going to be, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then that happened. Because there are so many events.
The next 4 episodes are going to be extremely awesome.
Yes.
I mean, you can definitely see why they made that decision to go ahead and split these up into this book up into 2 halves because so much has happened already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. There is no way you could have done this as one. It would have been so.
Yeah, and what's funny is they should have taken liberties and added things into season 4. But what's funny is the last 300 pages or so of book 3 are so loaded. Most of these major events that we're talking about happen in the last 300 pages of book 3.
Yeah.
So and I'm really glad they did that. They focused on building up to the Red Wedding and having it happen. And this season being, here's the fallout from that, because there were so many things that had to happen. There's, like you said, absolutely no way they could have adapted a Storm for Swords into one season like they did with a Clash of Kings and a Game of Thrones.
Right.
Well, guys, that's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for Dalton for tuning in, and thank you, as always, for all you guys to having your input. As per always, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/castbeyondthewall, or you can follow us at Twitter, cast_beyond_GOT. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe, and give us comments that way. Or you can always see us, read from us at wegotThisCovered.com. And lastly, of course, always subscribe on iTunes and give us a rating. We've had a few people give us ratings already from you guys that way. That's probably the most effective way you can really support our show, is by going on iTunes and giving us a rating and maybe even a review.
I wasn't going to insist on plugging myself, but I do often enjoy doing it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've been in the slightest bit amused by listening to me talk, you can find me on The Good Trash Genre Cast is a podcast I host. We talk about cult and genre cinema, and we try to bring some academic analysis to it. When I'm not talking about movies and Game of Thrones, I'm a social worker, and I have a degree in sociology, so that's where a lot of my background comes from, and I'm with a couple of guys who are very well versed in film studies. So we try to bring that kind of high academic talk to culty and genre movies. We just released one over Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We're getting ready to release one over Donnie Darko and getting ready to record one for Jurassic Park. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, check out the Good Trash Genre Cast on iTunes and at goodtrashgenrecast.podbean.com. Again, it's basically more of me, so enjoy that. It's the conversations you have outside of a movie theater, only a little bit more structured. So I'd be happy to have you guys check us out.
Awesome. And I want to say thanks so much to Dalton. I guest hosted with Dalton on the Good Trash Genre. I guest hosted on the Good Trash Genre Cast with Dalton, and it's a lot of fun. Him and Arthur and Dustin really do some really great work there. And I must insist, if you love movies, you must check out this podcast, guys. They go in depth. We're talking Marxist readings. We're talking like psychosexual readings. We're talking all sorts of movie analysis that I think a lot of people who are really into Game of Thrones would really appreciate. All right, guys.
It's a good podcast, and it delights me.
We're going to go ahead and move on to our prehash of next week's episode, Mockingbird.
You threw your life away. You threw it away.
Don't give up on me just yet.
Mercy!
Send me to kill your enemies. Any enemy, anywhere. Let me do what I do best.
Thanks to you, I'm a walking bag of silver.
You are strong enough to look into the Lord's light and see his truth for yourself.
Given the opportunity, what do we do to those who've hurt the ones we love?
Hey guys, guess what? After episode 4, HBO decided to stop releasing press releases about their synopsis, so we get to speculate again. Yippee. So I'm going to go ahead and guess, given the title, Littlefinger's going to do something awesome.
I think, so we saw the clips, right? I truly believe Sansa is becoming Littlefinger's protege. She is going to be mimicking, in the same way a mockingbird would, Littlefinger.
Look at there.
I also think Sansa is going to kill Lysa. I just do. I think she's dead.
Ooh, you think she's finally gonna get blood on her hands?
That'd be a really big step for Sansa.
I feel like she's like, I had enough, I'm not gonna take this anymore.
I have thought from that first second that we see Lisa and Littlefinger on screen to get Lisa, whatever, and Littlefinger on screen together. I had some inklings of it when he decided to marry off with Crazy Pants. But from the first second they were on screen together, I was just like, okay, he's going to kill her. There's no way. There's no way he's not going to kill both her and her weird little mentally malformed baby.
The whole thing where he throws a little glass bird through the moon gate, I'm like, that's going to be you in a couple episodes. I can already see it. And I will note that, yes, we know Littlefinger was involved in the killing of Jon Arryn. If he kills off Lysa and Robin, he's like the last one left. Another heir who died was Jon Arryn's nephew, who was killed by the Mountain in one of the jousting competitions, which I believe Littlefinger was involved in as well.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That's all the way back in season 1.
Yep.
Way back. But hey, if anything, I will say if this season has taught us anything, it's that don't forget about things that happened in season 1 because they might come back. Literally, like several episodes. Yeah, well, Littlefinger being the title Mockingbird, I think he is going to be kind of our featured storyline next week, if I had to guess. And guys, it's the Littlefinger show, so that means Caleb's very excited to see what kind of manipulation and evil this guy is doing. I've been thinking about this guy a lot. Littlefinger is the devil. He is the worst form of evil you could possibly have. And I know I talked about this a couple episodes ago, but let me just point it this way. He doesn't do anything really evil. He doesn't kill people. He doesn't rape people. He doesn't shoot whores with crossbows and arrows. He doesn't poison people. He doesn't do any of this. You want to make him truly...
else to do it for him.
He gets other people to do it for him. But you know who else does that in the Bible, right? I'm just saying. I mean, the most evil character in Christian mythology doesn't ever actually do anything evil. He just gets other people to do it for him. And Littlefinger, and I've said many times, while as much as I admire him for his intelligence and his cunning moves and his manipulation, I think it's brilliant. I think he's probably the most evil character in Westeros because his hands aren't dirty. He's not doing anything. But man, the evils that happen because of his command are just astonishing, world-changing. And I think next episode, maybe we'll get a little insight into that, hopefully. Aside from Littlefinger, though, we do get, as you guys mentioned earlier in the episode, we do get a glimpse of the Mountain coming back. And he's a freaking bodybuilder. They recast him to be the biggest freaking dude they could find.
He's so huge.
Much like Bobby Draper on Mad Men, the Mountain just cannot be a single person. Just constantly being recast.
I think the show has done a good job at kind of naming the Mountain, especially with Oberon's story, like so we don't forget who this guy is. But next episode, he's going to finally appear.
Don't forget about Oberyn and Tywin's little deal either, about where Tywin agrees to help him bring justice to the Mountain as well. So I think with that whole that all gets thrown into play as well in this whole thing.
This is why trial by combat, Oberyn and the Mountain, all debts will be paid.
Gosh, Austin, I just have to say, if that happened, that might be the most epic fight I've ever seen in my life. I say no more, my friend.
And they're going to fight in close quarters, and the Mountain's going to have a giant sword that's useless in close quarters. And Oberyn will stab him in the wrist with a knife.
Hey, listen, if anything, his brother Sandor the Hound Clegane proved that big swords in close quarters are awesome, okay?
Only when motivated by chicken.
I understand that if any more words come pouring out your cunt mouth, I'm gonna have to eat every fucking chicken in this room.
You're gonna die for some chickens.
Someone is.
Moving on beyond the Mountain, we also got a glimpse at Melisandre. And honestly, guys, we haven't really seen her much this season, which is cool with me. She's kind of crazy. But,
Davos has definitely been more of the focus with the Stannis storyline this season.
Yeah, and I'm totally cool with that. But we'll get to have her come back into the fold a little bit here. Looks like she's talking to Stannis' wife, who, if you remember correctly where we left her off, she was kind of crazy, insane, religious zealot chick. So there's that.
Yep.
And I guess we already talked about Lysa, Arryn, and Sansa. You guys thinking Sansa's going to toss out the moon roof. So that's pretty cool. I'm down with that.
The moon roof.
Well, all right, guys. Well, I think this has been a show. Thank you so much to everyone who's participated. I've had a lot of fun recording this one. And I cannot wait to see where this all goes in the next week. I'm not going to say specifics, but I have been alluding since the beginning of the season that this season was going to be the bloodbath to end all bloodbaths, right? Well, now that I've figured out exactly where we're at and everything, I can just honestly say people are going to start dropping like flies. Next episode, people are going to start dying. Oh.
Yep.
They start going like that. It's crazy.
Exactly. Nope, you're totally right.
All characters must die.
Seriously. Lastly, I want to go ahead and thank Dalton again for coming on this week. We've really appreciated having you. Really appreciate your insights, and we always really appreciate your Twitter feedback. Continue to send that to us, and we'll keep reading on the show.
I will be happy to oblige.
All right, great. All right, guys. Well, we'll wrap up, and next week, make sure to tune in when we review next week's episode, Mockingbird, with special guest Professor Mark Harris of the Realm, where we discuss Littlefinger. He has a little bit of a Littlefinger man crush.
Does Ramsey Bolton look like he belongs in the Shire to anyone else? He totally looks like a hobbit to me. He's got the haircut and everything. It's really bizarre.
He's got the hobbit fro going on there. A little bit. Yeah, he's got the Samwise
totally
Gamgee. It's like all ruffled and stuff. Okay. Hey, for our one listener viewing in, we are sponsored by Starter Stout, brewed by Austin Lucari. It's the finest stout you find across the 7 seas of Westeros.